slip in the description of your book. Once by Lee Hamilton at the staff meeting on Monday, and today by an unnamed staff member who sent around a reminder, and the title came out, The Toothpaste of Immorality. And that might sell more books, actually. Is that not the title? That's why you came? Anyway, that's just to let you know that we hope no one is here under false advertising.
Why not?
Elmer Hankish has been twice at the center to our great pleasure and benefit. He was educated at Budapest University in the humanities and in sociology. His first teaching job was as a professor of English literature, English culture and literature. He has subsequently taught at a number of universities in Canada, the United States, was director of the Institute of Sociology of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and has been working for several years, since 2000 in fact, with the Gallup Institution, doing survey research both in Hungary and across Europe, and is chairman of the board of trustees of Gallup Europe. Elmer is the author of over 24 books. He's been recently teaching at the College of Europe in Bruges, and he has lectured widely in Europe and the United States. We're especially fortunate to have, giving a comment on the book, Professor Amitai Etzioni, university professor at George Washington University. He is the author of numerous books. The most recent, just coming out, I guess, is entitled Security First, a look at what foreign policy the United States should pursue post-2008. He has served as a senior aide at the White House, as president of the American Sociological Association, has taught at Columbia, Harvard, and Berkeley, and was listed in Richard Posner's book, Public Intellectuals, as one of the country's top 100 intellectuals. Without any further ado from me, let Elmer explain the highlights of the book, and then we'll have a comment from Professor Etzioni, and then opportunity for discussion and questions. Elmer?
Sam, thank you very much for these kind words. And thank you, Professor Etzioni, for accepting the job of commentator or commenting on this book. How to begin? I am really very honored to be here and to have your presence here on this crazy and funny book, which I thank to Joe Brindley and to Sam that it was published by this publishing house and by the Johns Hopkins University Press. I never thought that it could be published by this kind of publishing houses. So it's the title is not my responsibility. It is the responsibility of other people. It was a subtitle, a title of a chapter, and the original title was the subtitle of the present book. So this was the subtitle, and this was the title, and that's why it was inverted. And we thought that people will buy this crazy title book. We may have been mistaken or not, but let's hope not. And this is the book as you have seen it. And what is it about? The book is a systemic review and an interdisciplinary analysis of the various ways in which people try to cope with the problems of self-construction in our contemporary consumer civilization. That's the main topic, the main of the book. And the main idea which I try to develop and support was that human beings live on and construct themselves on two levels, even if they are not necessarily aware of this duality. What are these two levels? They live on the levels of the trivial and also on the level of the existential. Now, what do I mean by these emphatic concepts? They live on the levels of the trivialities of their everyday life. So they work and walk and raise their children and read the books and do anything which is important for their lives, everyday lives, and for their survival. But at the same time, without necessarily knowing it, they are always struggling continuously, practically continuously, with the ultimate questions of the human condition, without necessarily being aware of this underlying drama of their life, which may be perhaps sometimes more important than the upper level, their everyday lives. And they are struggling with the questions of good and evil. What is freedom, and how can I preserve my dignity? And what it may be the meaning of my life? What is time, mutability? How to face death? These are questions which they do not really ask themselves, but somehow there in the back of their minds throughout their lives. And I repeat, without necessarily knowing it. This book tries to explore this layer of meanings underlying the trivial surface of our everyday lives. So what is this drama underlying our everyday life? That's the main question of the book. But the book is not so gloomy and serious. Speaking about ultimate questions, it is, I think, it was funny for me to write. Maybe it's boring to read for you. Well, it depends. The title is The Toothpaste, of course, and the underlying something very important, our aspiration and attempt to get up into the heights of the transcendental, into immortality. Now, I don't tell now how I try to explain the connection between the toothpaste and immortality. Well, in the book there is a short chapter on this problem. I will show that this underlying drama is there even in those trivial situations when we wash our teeth in the morning. For a long time, another example. For a long time, I did not understand why my wife loved so much our washing machine. She loved it, and she does love it still. After a couple of years, I started to begin to understand why a washing machine, another one. They are beautiful, yeah. So why not love them? So beauty, that's very attractive. Also, a washing machine is modest and dignified, standing there modestly and with dignity. At the same time, with prudent discipline and thrift, in a prelapsarian innocence, because it's clean and beautifully white, has demonic powers, because it is able to clean not only our laundry, but also our defiled world and lives. When we see it working in its purity and innocence, we somehow feel, we have the illusion that it also cleans our lives and the world and everything, not only our laundry. We've been mistaken, but we have this feeling. You don't have this? I do have now. I do have. It is so good that everything will be clean and innocent again. Time destroys everything, defies everything. And now the beautiful washing machine cleans and defeats corruption and decline. It reverses time and defeats death, because corruption by time, by filth, is death. And now, the washing machine reverses time and defeats mutability. And also, there is an underlying mythology behind or beneath each washing machine, a mythology, an important myth, a real archetype. Because a washing machine is a mandala, and you know what mandala is. It's a famous symbol in many cultures, mainly in the Hindu culture, not only there. Or also, it is the Holy Grail. I'll explain why I think so. A mandala is a square, which is a symbol of the earth, of the physical world, and it is also, that's the washing machine with the porthole, and a circle is the symbol of the universe, of the sky. of the sky, and the two together are the symbols of the universe, of everything, the great harmony of the world for the Hindus. And if we if this porthole grows, then we have an interesting figure, which is an octagonal shape. And what is an octagonal shape? It is a mandala, a circle with an inbuilt square in it, and the two together give up an octagonal figure. And the octagonal became a very important shape in our civilization. Many Gothic spires are octagonal in its foundations. The most beautiful Italian fountains have an octagonal ground basin and circular upper basins, etc. So the mandala is the symbol of the universe, and the washing machine so becomes an important symbol. And the Holy Grail, that's a poster, a washing machine in a beautiful Celtic forest where Arthur's knights try to find the Holy Grail. I don't know how this machine got in this Celtic forest, but it is there. So it is now we have found the Holy Grail in the washing machine in our consumer civilization, thanks to AEG and company. The deal is, I think, a mistake by the creators of this poster. It doesn't really fit into this holy experience of the Holy Grail. Trivialities are not trivial at all. They have a deep structure of meaning, and that's and the book is full of questions and not very rich in answers. Let me give those questions which play an important role in the book. What can toothpaste have to do with immortality? I try to find out. What do perfumes have to do with philosophy? They do a lot. What can Tony Soprano have to do with the gospel? There are two famous books on this, which explain that the whole Bloody series is about a Christian or religious man desperately searching for redemption and salvation. What do shopping malls have to do with the tabernacle or the choir of angels? Have you certainly you were several times in the Pentagon shopping mall, and everybody here. And there is a tabernacle on the ground floor. Have you noticed it? A real tabernacle. How gets a tabernacle? It's like this. How does a tabernacle get into a shopping mall? The most sacred symbol of Christianity and of Judaism, the tabernacle, in a very secular shopping mall, but full of symbols at the same time. Other questions. What do advertisements have to do with the meaning of our lives? A lot. What do eternal meats do in the women's weekly magazines? They do a lot. Women's magazines are full of very old archetypes and meats. If we had time, I could show you hundreds of illustrations. Why do we love gossip and scandals which fill these magazines? Why do we love to crunch other people's lives? We love. I personally love to crunch people's lives. Are we cannibals, or there is something else in it? What is the hidden message of the consumer civilization? It's a very strong hidden message, not so superficial as we usually think. How can trivialities construct ourselves? That's also one of the main questions of the book. Our lives are much more exciting adventures than they may seem to be on the surface. That's one of the conclusions. Now, very quickly, in the first part of the book, I speak about the self-construction from morning till night. I have one person, a young lady, let's say, and I follow her. And this is she, with beautiful red hairs, and that's she. So we are following a young lady from morning till night, and we try to understand what does she do when she is making her coiffure, when she is making her makeup, when she is walking in the streets, when she's working. What is the underlying importance for herself of all these trivial everyday activities, what she's doing throughout? In the morning, how does she reconstruct herself? What happened to people's self at night? And what happens to their selves during the day? In the street, while they drive their cars, at their workplace, in the shopping center, in the pub, in the evening in front of the screens. So the book tries to find the hidden drama on these trivialities of our everyday, important trivialities of our everyday lives. The self, how many selves do they have? 1, 10, or do we have 1, 10, 1,000, or none? There are lots of theories supporting any of these theories here. Do people have a different self in each situation of your life? Do you, who are sitting here, now a different self which you had in the morning? And I could quote great philosophers who said that, well, in the morning I still knew who I was, but now in the afternoon I have no idea. It was Alice in Wonderland who had his famous sentence. So we are changing ourselves throughout the day. Or have people no self at all? There are lots of no self theories. And there are lots of types of selves. What kind of self do they have? And I try to go through this integrated, autonomous self with a strong inner core, a looking glass self, a self which is a narrative, a self which is centered, decentered, void, transparent, latent, Faustian. People have in them a whole self-zoo. Which one would you choose for yourself? Now, in this moment, because maybe in 1 hour there'll be a different one which you would pick for yourself. And there are people who they have no self at all. The care of the self is very important. How can people care for themselves? And you know that this care for the self is important since Socrates' time. He was the first to write about caring for oneself, followed by Nietzsche and Foucault and other people. We have to know oneself, to control, monitor, construct, manage, present, protect, esteem, accept, actualize ourselves. And these are difficult technologies. That's Foucault's world. And we have to learn. We should learn it at school. In the US, do you learn these things at school? Not in Hungary. It should be. We should learn this in the maternal schools, in families, from our parents, at school, even at university. There should be courses on how to present ourselves, how to accept ourselves. It's so difficult. At least for myself, it is difficult to accept myself. We should learn about this. How did care for himself Socrates, St. Augustine, Baudelaire, Nietzsche, Michel Foucault? They are very good examples, and we could learn a lot from them. In the second part of the book, the self-construction is being studied on a more general level in the consumer age, not in just in one day by one single person. I call this age the proletarian renaissance. Because I think that now we live in an age which has lots of similarities with the Renaissance. The main difference is that in the 14th or 15th century, only very few people, there's the blue square, a few thousand in the whole Europe, could live up to the ideals of the Renaissance because they had the means, the education and time and everything. Now there are hundreds of millions of people who have all the means, even some education, and even they have the message to they should actualize themselves. They should become authentic and rich selves, and not all of them can live with this opportunity. But this is a mass renaissance nowadays. That's why I call it provocatively a proletarian renaissance. It's really provocative. It's not very serious. The term. There are lots of superficial similarities, and I don't have the time to speak about. I give just one example: the golden tub of Louis the Great, who was a late Renaissance king. He was almost the only man in Europe in those times who had a golden tub, and he could bathe every morning in flowing hot water. Nobody else. Nowadays, everybody of you can just open the tap and hot water is coming. It was more complicated in his time because there were servants in the upper floor who were pouring hot water from tubs into a tube which was flowing down to the into the golden tub of Louis the Great. Now we have all of us this comfort. Or the last one, only kings and priests and popes had the means to have musicians who were fiddling while they were eating their rich dinners or lunches. Now we have in our pockets Beethoven and all the stars, and with pushing a button, I can have the Ninth Symphony, or the second something of anybody, and I can stop anytime. Even Beethoven, I can stop him anytime. It is really power. This is the Renaissance power and wealth. But there are essential similarities between the two ages, which are important for our construction of ourselves. Both epochs are characterized not very deeply by harmony and disharmony, by dualities, by beauty and horror, by joy and melancholy. The Renaissance is not full of joys. If you look at, if you read Renaissance poetry, it is full of melancholy. There is very little joy in them. It's full of melancholy. Almost all poets. It was a glorious and tragic vision of the world, and ours, I think, is the same. Or materialism and spirituality is both characteristic of the two ages, realism and symbolism. And I shall speak about the symbols in a moment. There was a duality of values, and now I speak of our own age. Our grandmothers had these main principles of behavior: love thy neighbor, etc. My grandmother taught me, even my parents taught me these important norms of behavior, and they still are alive nowadays because they are important nowadays. But a new set of norms have emerged in the last 50 years, and the two are mixing. Love thy neighbor, no. Love thyself, that's the new message of the consumer age. Sacrifice yourself, no. Actualize yourself. Discipline yourself, no. Enjoy yourself. Be modest, no. Be successful. Obey, no. Be free. Say, be free, no. Consume. Do your duty, first fight for your rights. You are guilty, no. You are innocent. Take care, no. Take a risk. These are two opposite, contradictory sets of basic principles of human behavior, and we live in these two worlds at once. We have to follow both sets. It's very difficult because there's a kind of syncretic age in this field, and so that's why it is so difficult to make decisions. Or if you have a daughter of 17 years old, it's very difficult to give a good advice for them. 50 years ago, it was so simple because the principles were obvious. Now they are ambiguous. The duality of our vision of the human being, our age, and the same is true of the Renaissance of the 14th, 15th centuries. Our age is at the same time the apotheosis and the destruction of the human self. We live in this duality. Why? Because, yes, earlier God was the most important framework within which our lives had a meaning. Later history or society became the most important frameworks for Hegel or for Marx and company. But these frameworks lost their importance in the last 50 or 60 years. They are still very important for many people. God or history or a sacred cause for the welfare of society. But the individual has become more and more an important framework for herself or for himself. So we have to find our goals, aims, targets, values in ourselves, and the old frameworks have lost their importance, and the individual has become more and more important. And now we now live in this age where the individual is her or his own framework of values, and this is not easy. Lots of people and very important scholars say that it is impossible because we need an outside framework to make our lives meaningful. But the consumer age, broadcasts us the message that you are important and you will find the major values in yourself. These are the apotheosis of the human self. I give some posters. These are the mysterious, strong, macho, self-constructing, self-actualizing people. Well, this is the apotheosis of the human being. There is only one problem with this again. He shouldn't smile, because a great hero doesn't smile. A great hero, defeats the world and defeats the evil and the monsters of the world and doesn't smile at all. But that's the American ideal, that the great golf player on the ultimate symbol of success on his own yacht with a nice dog, or playing golf on his own jet is also really the symbol of ultimate success. But this age is also the age of the destruction of the hopes. It has a long history. Hobbes, Hume, Locke began to destroy Marx, Darwin, Nietzsche, Freud. They did a lot to destroy this illusion of the greatness and divinity of the human self. And the 20th century, it was the bloodiest century almost in our history. With the Holocaust, the Gulag, 2 world wars, lots of civil wars, and misery. So it destroyed our idealistic view of the human self. So the human self can be a monster, can be a cruel monster. So the century itself destroyed our idealistic image of ourselves. And now there is lots of talk and lots of books about the decentering of the self as a trap, the deconstruction of the self, the annihilation of the self, the de-divinization of the self, and lots of no-self theories. So our century and the consumer age is at once the apotheosis and the destruction of human self, which again is an important and difficult duality for our duty to construct ourselves. And again, another duality which is discussed in the book, the duality of the trivial and the symbolical. I mentioned the shopping center, and I don't want to, there are lots of books on the symbolic content of the shopping center. I mentioned the tabernacle, but there are lots of other symbols. The shopping center is full of symbols. I have no time. But advertising, the cheapest genre of our age, is full of not only of symbols, but of archetypes. And the oldest and most important myths and mythologies of any of the greatest civilizations of the world in advertising, in the cheapest genre. Well, for instance, this is a well-known and a very good poster of Yves Saint, a perfume of Yves Saint Laurent. This is a archetype, a symbol, a myth of what? May I ask you? It's a seminar in my class in Bruges. What is the what is the archetype, the symbol, what beat is there in this cheap perfume poster? A very old one, a very important one. Well, of course we don't have time to discuss it too long. This is the symbol of one of the symbols of the creation of the world. The 23rd or 24th verse in the Genesis is about the second act of the creation of the world. God divides darkness and light. She pushes the wall of darkness aside, and light comes in, and the blue color, where the symbol of transcendence, and the golden color, the symbol of the holy, of the Son of the holy, of eternity, is there in one cheap perfume poster. The same with the creation of the pushing aside of the cold or the ice, and the fire is coming in. Another beautiful, that's a very old archetype, of course, you know, because it's very well known. That's the archetype of the beauty and the monster. And even the text is very interesting. Tendre et sauvage comme son parfum, j'ai osé. That's surprising to have this text in a poster. First, if a beautiful woman is tender, that's very good. If she is savage, that's even better. If she is at the same time tender and savage, that's the top. That's fantastic. That's one thing. but there is still another thing. There is an underlying philosophy. She says, "J'ai osé." I dare to be myself. I dare to be myself. Who said this? This is a quotation from who? And the creator of this poster, I think, did not know the author of this famous sentence. I dare, that's Nietzsche. It's a sentence by Nietzsche. How does Nietzsche come into a trivial 20th century perfume poster? Again, we have this underlying latent message of, and that's again a surprising poster. Where the gold, of course, is the color of the holy. That's okay, but that's again a Renaissance philosophy, or a late Greek philosophy is worded here. The text, Ramsey, you can perhaps not read it. The inner light which makes you shine. Which philosophies had this sentence as its major message? It was Gnosticism and later on Neoplatonism. That you have to let the inner light, find the inner light in yourself, and try and have this inner light to break through your material self and shine into the universe and get back into the holy realm of the divine. And that's, we have this text on a junk, cheap perfume poster. Again, the duality of our world. We live at the once in a very rational information age, in a digital world, cognitive, etc. And at the same time, we live in a very irrational world. Not in a digital, but in an analog world. Not in a cognitive, but in an emotional and instinctive. Not in an analytic, but in a holistic culture. Not in a rational, but a non-rational culture. Not in among theories, but among myths. Not the text, but the image has become important. Not equations, but the symbols have become important. It is not any more practical and technical, it is existential. Not facts, but the experience has become the most important value in this age. And we live in both ages. So again, our age is a kind of mixture of two worlds, of two cultures. And we have to build and construct ourselves in this syncretic mixture, in this syncretic civilization. And I come now to the end of, we live in a rational and at the same time a re-enchanted world. And you have, of course, heard that lots of books are about the re-enchantment of the world. Max Weber wrote about the disenchantment of the world, the rationalization of the world, and now there are lots of books about the re-enchantment of the world. We live in a re-enchanted world, and at the same time in a rational world. And we have to construct ourselves in this contradictory mixed culture. Advertising, in advertising, enchantment has a growing role. In the 20th century, an amazing change has taken place. For instance, again coming back to my old example, in advertising. In the early century, advertising supplied information. In the late 20th century and the early 21st century, it supplies no information at all, but only experience and enchantment. Let me give some examples and finish then my talk. That's an early 20th century car advertisement. Only facts, a long text with facts. How many cylinders it has, how many valves it has, how much horsepower it has got, etc. Only facts. What kind of brakes it has got, etc., etc. Only facts. And now jumping in 20 years, the symbolism begins. It's already, facts are still there, the text is long, facts are still there, but the front of the car is already symbolic. Well, it symbolizes the power, the speed, the power, and also it's a kind of sexual symbol already. And then it becomes pure symbolism. No fact at all, but only experience. In the 80s, the car is running through an alien world, afraid of the alien world. There is no living people in that, you see. In modern advertisements, there are no people sitting in the car. The cars have become symbols in themselves, rushing through an alien world. And it means the safety and the beauty in an alien world. Or it is the really experience of speed, of exploding, of pleasure, of force, of strength. Again, rushing through a fearful world. Or a car of an undertaker with a corpse in it, but it is also positive because the doves are the symbols of freedom, of transcendence, of joy. So that's a mixed dual symbolism. And the car, there is hope in the world because the car, out of the alien world, the car is running, heading at a new world of light, of renewal, of rebirth. And here, well, you see again a car advertised, but the car, where the fact, the car, is not any more important. The experience which it gives, this car gives you the experience of the whole universe. You will be the hero who conquers this fantastic, illimited, infinite world, ocean, universe, etc. So the experience is more important than the fact. And that's my last illustration. It even says what you pay for and what you get. You pay for the tip of the iceberg, and you get this whole deep, fantastic, mysterious experience of life and the universe and the meaning of your life in this mystery. So the age of consumption gives you this fantastic experience, not any more facts. That's a new civilization in a way. Self-consumption in the consumer age, in an age of so many contradictory influences and challenges, is it possible? That's the question of the book. How to do it? How can human beings develop and protect the freedom and dignity of ourselves and the meaning of our lives in this age, what has been called by experts both an eternal carnival and a dance of death? Thank you. That's the book about. It's a question. It ends with a question mark because the book asks the questions and tries to help the reader to find her or his answers for herself or himself, and opens the door for the reader for finding the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. That's great. Amitai?
Wow. I remind you that my distinguished colleague started his presentation by twice calling the book crazy, which I think is very unfortunate. It's a very scholarly and rich book, and it's great credit to the Wilson Center and Hopkins to publish it. And I think there's some copies. I urge you all to be sure to take them with you and read them, because you know where I can do justice to all the rich material in this volume and the rich presentation, which you got its flavor. I'll come back to the washing machines, which reverse time and defeat death. But let me first deal basically with. I'm going to focus only on two issues. One is this notion of the individual self, who reconstruct itself by what she wears and what kind of jewelry, what kind of washing machines, what kind of car you drive. Which, as a communitarian, I don't think you'd be surprised, not exactly the way I see the world. And second, I come to the issue of the canon of evidence, which is particularly fascinating. So the underlying subtext is, I very much agree with you, there's duality to everything, but in this case it's fairly unipolar, and that is the notion which I come to associate with individualism. As Kenneth Bolden put it, that people are born at the age of 21 with their preferences in place, and then they get up and decide, so how do I want to reconstruct myself today? Do I want to be more loving, then let me go and buy her some perfume, or do I want to be more, whatever. And the struggle is between self and self, how you keep rebuilding that construction. So when it talks here in the book about the social construction of the self, it's the construction of the social by the self, and not the social construction of the self. Now, it's tempting, and often people fall into the trap, to see the communitarian viewpoint as the extreme opposite of the viewpoint, and see the self basically a reflection of its community, its history, its culture, and its context. And it's not difficult to push that point, because if your self is being constructed in traditional village in China or around the corner here, it's a fair prediction they're not going to come out the same way. And the issues they're going to struggle with, and even if they rebel, I'll come back to that, they will all be reflecting their historical and cultural context to much higher degree than any internal processes. But there is a danger, and of like the Singaporean and Malaysian intellectuals, which are the most articulate advocates of this extreme view, which the self is basically a cell of an organic larger whole, doesn't really have a standing or meaning by itself at all, well, there's no need or no reason to go to the opposite extreme. I think one can show on second reflection that there is a tug of war between the social construction, by which I mean being constructed by the culture, by history, by social context, and the kind of egging out of some individuality. Now, I'm going to digress here for a moment to what I want to call the Karl Mannheim thesis, because it's very relevant to people around this table. So intellectuals have all kind of self-privileges. They are less dominated by the economic and political and work world and such, and they usually build themselves high degrees of freedom than the rest of mortals. So, frankly, when I get up in the morning, there's nobody telling me what to do, and if they do, they'll be awfully sorry. But that's not the way most Americans or most people in the world lead their life. So please do not look at yourself to understand what the normal self is like. These are very privileged selves here. I don't mean in the terms of affluence and such. I mean in the sense that they have more degrees of freedom than 99.999% of the people. So when I talk about being constructed by your society, I'm talking about the rest of the mortals, not the intellectual who are somewhat exempted, so not far from free. Now, so if you for a moment realize that people are not born at age 21, one good way to think about it is when they're born, at the normal age they're born, and then you can see very readily that at least initially they're completely conditioned by their social and cultural environment. The language they learn, the signals they get, if they are brought up in a house discipline or in a loving manner, if they are subject to all this psychobabble. I mean, initially there's really very little individuality there, and they are to a very large extent a reflection of their social surrounding. And then as they move forward, they become a serial depository of social experiences. So if they start from their kindergarten and they go to a different high school, now it starts to matter if that high school is a public school or private school, if it's more diverse or less diverse, and they have a new set of experiences which are imprinted on the previous one, and then they date or meet people from other backgrounds and work and travel. So slowly there's this accumulation of different external experiences which all leave the imprint on the internal construction. It's still very largely a dependent variable, but it begins to allow them to play them against each other. So they get some measured degree of freedom by relying more on what they got from their parents, what they got from their school, what they got from their church, from the youth movement, from their workplace, from the people they fell in love with. So in effect, though it looks like they simply are a depository, a lot of social prescriptions, in effect, that also gives them some measure of a choice, and some opportunity to construct themselves. Now, the most effective way to show, nevertheless, if you kind of want to put it percentages, what degree of the variance is socially constructed and what degree is truly self-constructed, is to look at what happens when they rebel against the prescribed self. And you see that the rebellions are themselves prescribed. So if you're in the 1960s at Berkeley, you become a hippie or a free speech movement or whatever. And in the 60s in Kramer vs. Kramer, women rebel by going looking for their own identity. These days they rebel by spending full time with their children, if they're upper middle class, and so rebelling against the notion that they have to work outside the household. Now, again, I'm generalizing. It's, of course, much more complicated. But all I'm saying is when people rebel in a village in China and in Tibet and down the block, they don't rebel in the same way. So even the modes and the variety of rebellions are socially prescribed. Now, one of the lines in the book, let's see, I may as well give you the page so you can enjoy it yourself. On page 87, it goes back to, and it's a very telling line. There are many very telling lines, but that's one of the most telling. You go back to the Freudian idea that civilizations are a jail, that a civilization constricts us. And again, if you start with a free agent self, and then you get all these societal demands to behave, to whatever, no road rage, pay your tax and all that stuff, indeed civilization appears to you as an endless source of constraints to your libido, to whatever, to your aggression. The communitarian certainly recognizes that society limits itself by imposing all kind of restrictions, but it's equally important, at least, that society nurtures itself. So the notion that society is only oppressing and repressing itself is exactly, at best, half the story. So there are several ways of demonstrating that. One is there are a huge slew of experiments which show what happened to us when we really cut off our social groupings, when we're isolated. And when this is done in experiments, you put people in one of those floating tanks, for 3 hours, or you put them in solitary confinement in a prison and such, and they very, very quickly become disoriented because their psychological integrity, the capacity to examine themselves, to think, is very much dependent on being part of a social fabric. Their need for continual reinforcement. There is no self outside social nourishment. We are members of one another, which is exactly the viewpoint which is the subtext of this book seeks to differ. Or let me put it the other way around, it's not fair. The view I raise seeks to differ is the subtext of the book on that issue. And nevertheless, and that's where I particularly appreciate your discussion, which you didn't have a chance to do here, of authenticity. Now, having said all I said, let me now show a place where there's a bridge between this mild communitarian viewpoint and this strong, I call it individualistic viewpoint. That is, the self in the end cannot be completely successfully sublimated. So there is in the end something there which, however hard the society works, however accomplished its tools of socialization or enforcement are, someone cannot get a handle on that inner core, which then becomes source of some of the kind of things the book discusses about. And from that viewpoint, actually, the communist experience is particularly interesting. Here was Russia, which for 70 years had basically complete control. Again, don't think about intellectuals. Think about we're listening to the BBC at night. But think about the average person, what they were taught in school, the books they read, the music they heard, what was on the radio, what they were told. They were really in a cocoon, which was fairly complete, sending them a set of messages, well-known set of messages. And when you come there is something called the bourgeois residues. So you can say the first generation, they had still in them, in a core, whatever there was before the Soviet Union. But when you come to the third generation, and what are they? They are really not that different from us, you know. They want consumer goods, they want a car, they want an affluent, they want freedom, they want a very familiar list of things. You suddenly also see the other side of the story. The limits of socialization and of acculturation. When there's this huge machinery and so harmonized, so coordinated, and still cannot get, and so the authenticity then, for me, is a social structure which does not oppress that inner core, but gives it an opportunity to express itself. So in effect, you can, in the end, despite all I said about the importance of social and cultural context, judge different social constructions by how much they try to oppress and how much they respond. Responsiveness is really a key term for me here, to this ultimate self. And what makes them authentic, when they allow the inner core to find expression rather than oppress it. I want to turn now in a moment to the canon of evidence, and so let me just mention one more study, which I should, because it's actually a wonderful transition to the canon of evidence, and that is as a study done in Manhattan in the high-rise buildings, and these are the buildings in which people don't know their neighbors, because they lived there for 30, 40 years. And when my colleagues at Columbia University did a study, they found that 70% of them had one form or another of mental illness. So the notion that you can be the self, you know, if they just let you be, you know, it surely was not verified by these studies. So now we come to a different question. There are thousands, well, many hundred statements in this book. And I'm not going to read you two, so we go back to the flavor of washing machines, which reverse time and defeat death. And so I apologize to you. This is I can't possibly read it with the elegance in which it's written, but just to give you a flavor. So we talk. The context, as you heard, is about this young woman who is in the process of construction herself in various ways, the way she walks, the way she dresses, and now we come to jewels. Beware, jewels. The love of jewels is a vicious trap for the self. Golden jewels and diamonds are especially dangerous. Many for those who are on the wrong side of 40. I hate that phrase. Jewelry have an inner fire. They have a deep inner radiation of perfection, of the intensity and fullness of existence, of harmony, significance, and mainly timelessness and eternity. Well, the book is full, rich, loaded with these kind of statements, and the question to know how the hell we know. I mean, can you just declare these things and get away with it? The jewels are dangerous? Or do we have to have any evidence other than quote another philosopher? And here is an interesting answer that I owe it to an anthropologist at the University of Chicago, Schwedberg. He starts one of his really fabulous essays by saying he went to India and met with some people in India who told him that there is transmigration of souls and there are spirits, and they have proof. The proof is you put rice at night outside the house, and in the morning it's gone. So the spirit consumed it. And then he went to a meeting in Moscow of Marxists, and then Marxists said him whatever they said, and they had a proof. And then he went to a meeting of psychoanalysts who were interpreting dreams in Sweden, and they had their proof. And his point is, and a very interesting point, that each discipline has its own canon of evidence. Interpreting dream in psychiatry is acceptable. You won't go very far in sociology with interpreting dreams. The religious theories have their own, and his point is that if you accept the canon of evidence of whatever body of thought you deal with, they will be verified. Derives the discipline. If you apply the other criteria of evidence to this body of thought, none of them will hold, including our science. And so his claim is that our notion of falsification of hypothesis and all that is just a particular body of thought we find convincing, and because we use our methods of verification. So I think it's unfair to apply to this book the kind of evidence we use in the United States and in England. We are terribly empirical and pragmatic, and not all of us feel comfortable with statements that washing machines reverse time and defeat death. It's difficult for us to get our arms around it. I thought you were French. It was so great. Bombastic would be an ugly word,
Sure.
but grandiose, that's a better term. And so this is very much a continental tradition, and it's kind of intriguing for those of us who are so conditioned and lived so long in the empirical, pragmatic, kind of take one fact at a time and then piece them together, to open the canvases and let the washing machine defeat death.
Thank you, Emmett. It's very interesting, because I knew you would come at this from a very different perspective, and that's very nicely done.
Thank you.
So, questions, comments? Don?
Yeah, I'm Don Wolfensberg with the Center here. I enjoyed both of your presentations very much. When you were showing on the screen the duality of values, and the first that sort of jumped out at me, the top line was, on the one hand, love thyself, the other, love thy neighbor. And of course what came to my mind as someone raised in the Christian religion was what's called the two great commandments of Christianity, which to me has always been three, which Christ delivered in the Sermon on the Mount. Love thy neighbor as thyself was the first, then love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and might. And when I think about those and try and relate it to your talk, I mean, to me love was knowledge of self first is important before you can love your neighbor, and it does involve loving too. And then also in the context of God, the creator, that we are all part of the bigger universe, and that I think ties in, even though communitarianism doesn't speak directly to religion, it says many of the same things as the Christian religion and other religions do too, and that is finding meaning in relating to others in the larger context of being part of a bigger power, a bigger creation, and so on. But I think you interestingly take it a step further in looking at our material world and finding in various material things symbols that give us a larger message, and we can read all sorts of things into, and we all will look at things differently. Life is a Rorschach in our experience with the world and so on, but maybe it's a way of leading us back to some of these deeper meanings and contexts and so on that we lose in being distracted by material things, and that's at least what I got out of your talk, and I appreciate it.
I wonder if you, Professor Henkish, yes, are you familiar with Jim Twitchell? You know Jim Twitchell and his work?
No.
You would find him interesting because he's written a great deal about the importance of things, of objects, of material goods, and how they become sacramental. And he says they don't mean too much to us; they actually mean too little. That's why we have to buy so many of them, and they take the place, in his view, of what would have been religious, I guess, belief in God or religious ideas and so forth. But you find him very interesting. He's professor at the University of Florida. He's got a number of somewhat iconoclastic books that probably would dovetail nicely with what you're doing.
Actually, I thought of Jim Twitchell at the same time, if I may. And one of the intriguing arguments he makes, and it's something that you don't talk about a lot, but Twitchell argues that in consumer culture, a big part of what goes on is actually a search for not individuation, but for affinity and for community. That you see this especially in brands, whether it's Polo shirts or Porsche cars or Buicks or you name it. But so much of the consumer culture is about brands, which are, in his view, a form of affiliation, of identifying ourselves with others.
Tribal insignia.
But it's not just, of course, brands. It's all sorts of things. Signal affiliations. Your clothes or my clothes signal that we don't work for Chase Manhattan, for instance. And so, in a curious way, I wonder if part of what happens in consumer culture is an effort to get to where Amitai is. In fact, some effort. Maybe it's, well, I don't know what it is. That's the question, I suppose. I had a second question, which is, and I'll try and be brief, but that in your description, and let me tangent, I found your book enchanting, actually, and as it was intended to be. In your book, I see three kinds of historical trends or tendencies. I mean, you talk about proliferation of dualities. You talk about there's a sort of seems to be perhaps a cyclical pattern of enchantment and disenchantment. You sort of hinted at that. And what was the third? I can't remember the third. A democratization, in a way, of experience. And so I'm not going to suggest, or I don't believe that there's a sort of teleology here, but what is the historical nature of these things, and what have I left out?
Yeah, thank you first. Your very interesting comments, and that you developed an argument which complements very well the argument of the book. It might be opposed to the argument, or it might be a complementary argument to the argument in the book. And you are absolutely right that the community or society has a very strong role to play in shaping the human self. And the human self is not alone. It cannot develop itself freely, and the community imprints itself very strongly on the self. Sometimes it dominates the self and does not let it develop at all. At the same time, it may help. A culture may be a cage. At the same time, it may be a culture may be a window and a help which helps the self to develop itself. Without culture, the self could not develop itself. So I agree very much that this other side, the role of the community, is very important in this construction of the self. So the construction is self-construction and social construction. The book is about the self-construction. You spoke about the social construction, and the two are the two sides of the same process. Another thing, why to speak about the self so much? That's a very Western thing, and we might stop with it in a way. There are civilizations where the self did not play such an important role. In Hinduism or in Buddhism, the self is not something positive. It is much more a negative, which you have to get rid of. You have to escape from the self, not to develop it. When you develop it, you go into a trap, and you will come back to the world on a lower level. So you have to defeat yourself, not to develop it. And these are great civilizations, Buddhism and Hinduism, just the opposite of the Western one. And so that's a very much Western approach to the problem. And maybe I should have written much more about this other approach, that let's forget the self, let's destroy it, let's escape from it, which is as important as to develop it. When you spoke about Mannheim and company, and about intellectuals and about the role of society, I should like to mention also some other people, Heidegger or Sartre. Sartre said that the intellectuals are not free-floating at all. Mannheim was mistaken, but the intellectual has just one role, and Foucault has repeated the same. The intellectual has the only role to convince people that they are free, even if they are not, because the pressure, the domination, the indoctrination coming from outside, from society, is so strong that the intellectual has the role of knowing about this fact about the social fact. It has a role to help the individual to try to escape, to become free, to construct itself in spite of all the outside pressures. And this book is just a very modest, attempt in the same field. Sartre also says that if you think that you are free, that may be an illusion. When you get into a boundary situation at the edge of the precipice, you have to make the decision and jump into the precipice of freedom. But this is only for a moment. When you take a decision, in the next moment, you are free for one moment, for a minute, but in the next minute, in the next hour, in the next day, the world encloses upon you, again tries to dominate you. You get into the cage of your own decision, and then you again have to break out of it. So life is a continuous fight for freedom, for escape, for developing yourself, knowing that it is impossible, that there is no end of this attempt. And so this dialectic should be in the book. Maybe it is not there. You mentioned already authenticity. It's very important, and I should like here to quote Jaspers or Heidegger, who say that the goal, the aim, the target of the human being, if there is any, it is to try to become authentic, to try to get out of the oblivion of forgetting the real self, the real being, to be dispersed in the trivial world, in the world of work, amusement, and everyday anything, and try to get back into yourself and try to become authentic in a silence, in a loneliness, in yourself, finding the authentic being beneath all these trivialities of everyday life. And this is also an attempt without end, also an attempt prejudged to failure, but the attempt, the continuous attempt is important. Try to become, to know something about and experience something of the authentic being, if there is any. Yes, you are right about with the rice. A very good example of the rice. Yes, and there are lots of people who would support your idea that everybody has its own view of the world and may have even his own theory if he is a thinker, and any of these arguments may be good. And let me quote Rorty, who said that there are only better and better arguments. There is no truth. There may be a good or a better and even better or worse argument, and that's it. And we must try to develop our best argument, and with this we have other people to think and to find their own argument. And I would add, if I had still 2 minutes, that everybody is a person, a unique person. You have never been here in this world, and you have a couple of years to find something in the world, to perceive something which nobody else can perceive. And you have to help yourself and other people to perceive the thing which only they can perceive. And if they add these perceptions in a community, a kind of mosaic can be built about the universe, which is already something. It is not the final truth. It is something, at least. And yes, Don, you are certainly right that in the Bible, in the Old and in the New Testament, we have this text of love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that's true. Both are important. You cannot love anybody if you don't love yourself, and that's why the self-acceptance is so important, which is discussed so much nowadays by psychologists and psychiatrists, and also the objects. Yes, there are lots of books about the importance of objects, Bachelard was the first who discovered the importance of objects. And the latest book, I think, is a former fellow I think, of the center, Csikszentmihalyi was here, I think, or he wasn't here? No, he was in Stanford. Csikszentmihalyi, you know Csikszentmihalyi, the famous psychologist, who wrote a book on the symbolic and existential importance of objects, without which you cannot understand the world and you cannot survive even. So thank you very much for mentioning Fischer's name. I shall look him up. It may be very important. Yes, I agree with you that the community is very strong, and the brands, when we want to be ourselves, we just imitate ready-made models and brands, and we bear the genes, wanting to become ourselves and autonomous new people, and this is their uniform, and we are just joining the crowd. We get into the herd of UNESCO's rhinos, and that's true. This is this interaction. This is this contradiction. That while we are trying to be ourselves, we become members of a herd, and that's ironical, but that's a fact. And that's why you have to try to break out of this herd every day. That's only for the intellectuals. Only the people don't have the time for that. They have more important things to do. Intellectuals have to try to accept the ready-made models and then try to break out of them by changing the brand, changing the models, or I don't know, become a hermit. Or I don't know what the solution is. That there is a continuous struggle for being yourself or being free, which is again without end and without real success. These three trends, dualities, cyclicality, and the democratic experience, and how they fit into history, I would say that the dualities were there everywhere. Plato already spoke about the duality, and all the great philosophers spoke about duality, accepting it or objecting to it, saying that there is a monistic world. Now dualities have become more important. Now our age is more ambiguous and more risky and more contradictory. So now dualities are more important than they were 100 years ago. And then in 100 years they may lose their importance. So there's that fluctuation of duality and the monistic view of the world, I think. Now we are in an ambiguous dualistic world. That's a kind of transition, I think. The democracy, well, I think that this glorious progress of democracy, in which we, in the 19th century, 20th century, late 20th century, some people believed that the bourgeoisie had this ideology. Well, it is now less strong, and less people believe in this unbroken, victorious progress of democracy. Now we see the problems, the weaknesses of democracy, which doesn't mean that we don't have to fight for democracy, but without the illusion that it will be victorious all over the world in a couple of decades, like Fukuyama and company. It's a more difficult way and world, and I don't remember what the second was. I can't read my own.
I think you covered mine.
Okay, so it's an exciting world. It's exciting adventures we live now, I think, and you live now in, and the book tries to help you to discover this exciting world, and asking the good questions, and that's the most important thing, more important than the answers. You remember the famous sentence of a famous American poet and thinker who on her deathbed was asked, now tell us, her friend asked her, tell us, what is the answer after all? And she said before dying, what is the question? And so I think questions are important, and if the book can ask a few questions, then it's okay with me. Maybe not okay with you. That's it.
Can I add a sentence about Rorty?
Yep.
You see, it's really good that you bring Rorty into this. So we're going back to what are the canons for validation? Because after all, we make statements, and the question is, what is the truth value of the statements? Now, Rorty at least used to take the position that it's not only values are relative, but the criteria of validation are relative. And so there is no truth, as you just said, they're just arguments. Even the notion that they're better arguments presumes there's some way of judging which one is better, and Rorty, at least at some point, would not have bought it. There's a guy whose name escaped me for a moment, from Oxford, who just written a book with these days, instead of toothpaste, they have a very short title called The Truth. And he again repeats his argument that there is no such thing. Now, if you leave it there, then the conversation is over. Because, I say washing machines, are bad for your diet, and you say they make music, and then we all go home, So, and so I think Rorty and Fisher and others beginning to wave somewhat of a white flag. And they realize that if you take serious what they're saying, we have no conversation, and not only no truth. And so I leave you with the question: how can we get beyond this notion that everybody can bring with them not only their statements, but they will determine how they ought to be validated.
That's, session of questions.